After completing this lesson, you'll be able to understand tags, create a structural framing tag family, and add tags to a structural plan. The objective domains covered are 3.1b, create and modify annotation families for documentation. A tag is an annotation element that reports on specific information that resides within structured elements. For example, a beam tag could report on an elevation, display the quantity of shear studs, display the element weight, or in fact the type mark. The image at the bottom of the screen is showing the beam designation as well as the span to depth ratio. This is placed in one go with the beam annotation. Go ahead and open up the model 030, creating and modifying annotation families for documentation. The model opens up in the 05 fifth floor plan. You can see here that we have a roof framing plan, and here we have bracing. Our first task is to tag the bracing. To do this, select the Annotate ribbon and select Tag by Category. On the options bar, we can control the placement of the tag, whether it's horizontal or vertical, and also the type of tag we're placing. So here we can access our loaded tags. In the Loaded Tags and Symbols dialog box, let's expand our dialog, and we'll scroll down to find Structural Framing. We can now designate which type of tag we would like to use for our framing. So here I'm going to specify Structural Framing Tag Standard. We can then click OK, and you'll now notice as we move over the braced elements, we have our tag displayed. Another option we have here is to remove the leader. I can then go ahead and place my tags. Now, of course, I could continue to tag the rest of the framing plan, but what I'd like to do here is utilize the type mark of the frame rather than a full designation. To do this, I'll need to edit the tag. Select one of the tags that you've just placed, and on the context ribbon, go ahead and select Edit Family. The tag then opens up in the Family Editor. You can see here that I have a label shown on screen, so I'm going to go ahead and select this label, and again, on the context ribbon, I can edit the label. Currently, we're showing the full type name. So I'm going to select this and then remove the parameter from the label. What I want to use is the type mark. So of course we can select type mark here and we can add the parameter to the label. You'll notice in the label parameters area we can add multiple labels into this, and we can also have suffixes, prefixes, breaks, spaces and so on. Here I'm going to change the sample value, and I'm just going to call this one W1. Go ahead and select OK. We can now see a preview of our tag. If my intention in the project is to replace all the framing tags with the type mark designation, I can leave the family name the same and simply load into project and close, and that will replace all of the tags I've automatically placed. Let's go ahead and do that. So we'll select load into project and close. I don't want to save this, but in the project I want to overwrite the existing version. You'll now notice that the bracing now shows the type mark designation as opposed to the full call up. And of course here I can use the inbuilt move tool to reposition these tags to a better location. Next, I'm going to create a new tag to report on the span to depth ratio of our structural framing. Before we go ahead and create that tag, let's view that property in the Properties palette. Go ahead and select a beam. And in the Properties palette, you'll notice here under Structural Analysis, we have span to depth ratio, and it's holding a value. We want to create a tag that's going to report on this value for all of our framing members. To start, let's create a new family. Click File, then select New and Family. In the Select Family Templates dialog box, open the Annotations folder and then select Generic Tag. Now, a generic tag is generic in its nature, and before we can use this for a particular structural category, we must set the family categories and parameters. This red text here is reminding us to do this. So we'll go ahead and delete that text. On the Modify ribbon, let's go ahead and select Family Category and Parameters. Notice that the default category is Generic Model Tags. We'll go ahead and select Structural Framing Tags. A very important property under Family Parameters is Rotate with Component. Now, when we place this span to depth ratio down, we want it to be aligned to the beam. So, of course, yes, we do want that to rotate with a component. Go ahead and select OK. We're now ready to create our label. Select the Create ribbon and then select Label. Here is the default label size. And then we can pick where we want the label to be created. I'm going to select roughly the center of my reference planes. I'm then presented with the Edit Label dialog box. Now, our span to depth ratio will not be displayed in this particular dialog because it's a shared parameter. So we can go ahead and add that parameter. Let's click Select. And now we'll change our group to Structural Framing. And here we have our span to depth ratio. We can then go ahead and add that across into our label parameters. Now we'll give this a realistic sample value. So I think here we'll type in something like 12. And then we want to designate a prefix to this. So I'm going to type in here S:(D). And then I'm going to put a space in. So span to depth ratio, and then it's going to give us the span to depth ratio with a space. Let's go ahead and select OK. And there's our new tag created. Of course, we'll need to save this. So on the Quick Access toolbar, select Save. Save it into your current folder, and we'll call this Span to Depth Ratio. Go ahead and select Save. We now want to load this into our project and close, so we can click Load into Project and Close. And of course now, when we hover over Structural Framing, you can see that Revit is now displaying our span to depth ratio. We're not going to add that using the tag. We're going to use a beam annotation to add this as well as a tag. A more efficient way of placing tags on the plan is to use beam annotations. Beam annotations are capable of producing not only tags, but also spot elevations as well. We can combine these in pretty much any combination we want. We can tag the end of the beams, the start of the beams, as well as the mid positions on the beams. And as I've said, we can use spot levels on either side of the beam. To configure this, on the Annotate ribbon, let's select Beam Annotations. In the Beam Annotations dialog box, you'll note here that all beams in the current plan view are going to be placed with a beam annotation. We also have two tabs here. We have level beams in plan, and we also have sloped beams in plan. Our roof plan contains both level and sloped members, so we'll set the same settings for both of these tabs. Before we go ahead and set this area up, you'll also notice here we have placement settings. This configures the distance of the tag or the level from the end of the beam, also the vertical distance from the edge of the beam. You'll notice the default value is 3/8, but of course I could change that if I wanted to. Let's go ahead and select OK to placement settings. So in the first tab, Level Beams in Plan, you'll notice at the minute that we're showing structural tags at the start and the end of the beam, as well as a tag in the center of the beam. Let's set the tag at the end of this beam. So here, currently, we're showing the start forces on the beam. Note I could show a spot elevation, but in this case, I want to select none. I'll do the same for the right-hand side of the beam. And we just want to ensure that this tag in the center of the beam is in fact our standard framing tag. You may remember that the standard framing tag is just going to report on the type mark. At the bottom of the beam, we're going to place our new span to depth ratio. So let's select Structural Framing Tag, and you'll note the type is span to depth ratio. Of course, we could select a new type if we wanted to. Let's repeat these settings for sloped beams in plan. So we'll make sure we set the start and end tags to none. Double check that this tag is reporting our standard type mark. And here again, we'll add in a structural framing tag of our span to depth ratio. Go ahead and select OK. And you'll now note that the beam designation tag and also the span to depth ratio and is now tagged on all of our roofing plan. Much more efficient way of placing tags.